long time, these e-cigarettes existed in a very lightly regulated world. Now the FDA is proposing new rules. It'll start with sales to minors and health warning labels. It's the inside story. Hello, I'm Ray Suarez. Does a cigarette stop being a cigarette when you put the letter E in front of it? For a while, this fast-growing industry has threaded the needle, escaping a lot of the restrictions that have, over time, driven down cigarette smoking among American adults. Along with reining in the sales of electronic cigarettes, which deliver nicotine to the user or vapor without burning tobacco, the FDA wants to put new rules into place for a range of nicotine delivery tools, including cigars and nicotine gels. But as you've probably figured out by now, any new rule from a Washington regulator isn't as simple as that. There's bound to be pushback from conservatives who resent the reach of government into personal habits and decisions, and a display of muscle from the tobacco products industry, which is also invested in electronic cigarettes. That's this time on Inside Story. Here's where things stand now. Vape shops, like this one in Washington, D.C., are gaining popularity, much as the e-cigarettes vapors use. E-cigarettes began as a niche industry less than a decade ago. Today, the smokeless tobacco product has skyrocketed into more than 200 brands, millions of users, and $2 billion in sales. An e-cigarette is typically a battery-operated device which uses heat to turn a liquid containing nicotine into a vapor that can be inhaled. Now the government is stepping in to regulate the e-cigarette market. The Food and Drug Administration has issued several proposals setting a foundation for overseeing e-cigarettes, as well as cigars, pipe tobacco, and several other alternatives to cigarette smoking. Currently, the FDA only regulates cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, and roll-your-own tobacco. Some of the FDA's recommendations include an 18-plus age restriction to buy the product. Manufacturers of e-cigarettes would have to disclose to the FDA all the ingredients used in it. The FDA wants to end vending machine sales, and if manufacturers are going to claim their product is a safe alternative to smoking, they'll have to prove safety with scientific evidence.
For me, it did change my life, absolutely. I was about a pack-a-day smoker for 10 years, and the effects of smoking are really persistent over time, and the coughing and just the general feeling not well. This changes so much about everything of your life.
With Blue e-cigs, there's no tobacco smoke.
The e-cigarette industry is marketing itself as a cleaner, tar-free product that's more appealing and socially acceptable.
When I switched to Blue electronic cigarettes, not only did I feel better about myself, I felt the freedom to have a cigarette without the guilt.
Despite much independent research into e-cigarettes as a whole, there are conflicting reports as to their efficacy in helping smokers quit. In fact, some health officials see them as a potential gateway for young people to tobacco use. And as yet, there's little science that determines the health effect of e-cigarette use.
Overwhelmingly, this product, these e-cigarettes, electronic cigarettes, are appealing to children, to young people. First, they market them in flavors that adults aren't likely to buy. Cherry Crush, Chocolate Treat, Bubblegum. All of these flavors are designed to lure kids into this product.
So far, the FDA proposal would not restrict flavored e-cigarettes. But today's actions by the FDA begin a process that could lead to further restrictions upon the products.
What's critical now is for the FDA to act very quickly to finalize this rule and then to close gaps in the rule, especially by restricting marketing and sweet flavors that appeal to kids. And that's the biggest gap in this rule, is that it doesn't address marketing and flavorings of e-cigarettes and cigars that have really exploded and that we think appeal to kids.
The Centers for Disease Control report the use of e-cigarettes among high school students has more than doubled. In 2012, the CDC says 10% of teenagers, 1.7 million, are lighting up electronically. The FDA proposal does not include any regulations for advertising, which today comes in TV ads featuring Hollywood pitchmen.
For us smokers, times have changed.
It harkens back to the early days of television when smoking was embraced in American popular culture and ads like these were ubiquitous.
Come to where the flavor is. Come to Marlboro country.
But all that began to change with the first Surgeon General's report on the health dangers of smoking 50 years ago. TV advertising was banned in 1970, and in the years since, a combination of education, legislation, and litigation have cut smoking rates by half.
Oh, it's really good, man.
Vaping is not the same as smoking tobacco, but since e-cigarettes came on the market, it's been a free-for-all. Is it addictive? Does it lead to smoking? Or help you stop? Is it bad for you? Or isn't it? There'll be a 75-day comment period before the FDA makes final changes to the proposed rule, and that process could take months. But one way or another, the e-cigarette enters a new phase with the government now poised to take authority over a billion-dollar business. Expect dueling studies, high-powered lobbying, and politics to converge and reshape the vaping landscape. Putting new regulations on e-cigarettes into place may take a while, so we're beginning this conversation just as the American public begins its conversation. Joining us now from Stanford, California, Robert Proctor, a professor of the history of science at Stanford University. He's the author of Golden Holocaust, Origins of the Cigarette Catastrophe and the Case for Abolition. Here in our Washington studio, Jennifer Pearson, a research investigator at Legacy's Institute for Tobacco Research, and from Amsterdam, Ray Story, CEO and founder of the Tobacco Vapor Electronic Cigarette Association. Good to have you all with us. Ray Story, let me start with you. Sometimes in conversation, it's talked of one way, sometimes another. Is an e-cigarette a tobacco product?
Absolutely. The e-cigarette is a tobacco product due to the fact that nicotine derived from stem or leaf of a tobacco plant is therefore deemed a tobacco product. And that's why the e-cigarette in 2010 was clearly put under the FDA's control.
And when you saw these latest proposals for regulations on electronic nicotine delivery products, various ones, what was your first reaction?
Well, the devil is in the details, obviously, but I think that we're maybe overlooking some of these potential dangers that are lurking when you look at the FDA's proposal for substantial equivalency. That could potentially be a deal killer for the industry. So I think the regulation is good. Age verification, face-to-face, online, all these safety packaging, ingredients testing, all that I think the industry applauds. But some of the other issues, like the substantial equivalency aspect of the proposed rule, is going to be an issue.
Jennifer Pearson, that phrase comes up a lot in this debate, substantial equivalency. What is it and why is it so important?
Thank you. I want to caveat my explanation here in that I am a scientist and not a lawyer, so I'm going to give you my understanding as a scientist of what substantial equivalency is. But the idea is that there are certain products that are on the market at a time that is deemed important to FDA for cigarettes. I believe it was 2007, and that if a product can be allowed on the market if it is essentially the same, substantially equivalent as what was on the market in 2007 for cigarettes, or for some other date for e-cigarettes. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be for e-cigarettes. I know that the industry is concerned that this will mean that some of their products will be taken off the market at some point. I can't read the FDA's mind. I don't know what they're going to do.
Professor Proctor, there have been a lot of short-term reactions to these latest announcements. Some come from critics of the new e-cigarette industry saying that the FDA's proposals aren't tough enough. What do you make of what you've seen?
Well, I think that's true in general. You know, I have to remember the cigarette, the traditional analog cigarette, if you will, is probably the most deadly consumer product ever invented by humankind and kills about 480,000 people every year. So the shift over to a less deadly product is probably something we should welcome. The danger is that these products may also be used as bridge products just to keep on smoking. There's also the problem of the ingredients themselves, and I would agree with those who think the regulation doesn't go far enough because they're really not addressing yet the ingredients, and it's really going to be the ingredients that are the key issue.
And what do you mean? In this case, the oil that contains the nicotine?
Well, think about it. You can put basically anything you want into an electronic cigarette. You could put even cat urine if you wanted to. I mean, there's essentially no regulation whatsoever. And if we can get some uniformity there or some control, then we're going to have a changing situation, because until now, you've been able to put basically whatever you want. It's like making them in your garage or your bathtub. So there needs to be some safety standards.
Ray Story, that's one of the disclosures that it looks like is going to be part of this rulemaking, that people who make these products for vaping disclose what's in them. Are you at peace with that idea?
Absolutely. I mean, understand that we promote regulatory oversight for these products. We want these products to be consistent. We want these products manufactured with the highest regards for standards known to mankind. That is obviously what we push. I think that at the end, that responsible regulatory oversight is not going to be an issue for anybody. The issues that are going to be a problem is when potentially this market is going to be pushed by those government bodies that either promote and push this category towards towards big pharma or towards big tobacco. We want this category to have the ability to survive and to grow over the next several decades. We want to make sure that those rules and regulatory issues are going to be able to be met by those companies currently in business.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I want to tease out a little bit more what Ray Story was just talking about. What do big pharma and big tobacco have to do with the future of e-cigarettes? This is Inside Story. Stay with us. Welcome back to Inside Story. I'm Ray Suarez. The Food and Drug Administration is going to start regulating e-cigarettes. The proposed rules include banning the sale to minors, listing ingredients, and proving any claims of reduced risk to health with scientific evidence. The new rules also are being extended to other previously unregulated products, such as cigars, pipe tobacco, water pipe tobacco, nicotine gels, and dissolvables. And Professor Proctor, just before the break, you heard Ray Story talk about regulating through the FDA or regulating and pushing this into the arms of big pharma. What are the different avenues that open up here? If we look upon these products like food or look upon them like drugs, what's the difference and why is that an important distinction?
Well, it's key because the cigarette itself has always had this kind of schizophrenia. You know, it's been known within the industry to be a drug for a long time, but it's been essentially totally unregulated until recent years. What's now basically happening is the big tobacco companies are buying up these nicotine companies, these e-cigarette companies, and are moving toward a more of a pure drug model, with the theory being, you know, we can lose the tar, keep the nicotine, lose the cancer, keep the addiction. And so it's, in a sense, it is becoming more of a pure drug industry.
And would that create different hurdles, different sets of challenges for this still very young industry, if it was, for instance, to make a claim that it helps wean people off of tobacco cigarettes or moves them away from heavy smoking?
Yeah, sure. And of course, that's what's going to have to be tested. It's not clear now whether they're going to keep people smoking more or make people smoke less. Obviously, if the pure nicotine product could get rid of traditional cigarettes, that would be fantastic. What remains to be seen, though, is whether they act as bridge products to actually keep people smoking, and that's, I think one of the reasons the big companies have all bought into these e-cigarette companies.
Jennifer Pearson, in this proposed rulemaking, they've banned youth sales, they've gone after free samples, but they haven't touched flavoring. And why is that significant?
Well, what we're concerned about is that flavoring might be appealing to youth. So these products come in flavors from, regular tobacco to menthol, but they also come in a myriad of flavors: peanut butter and jelly,
fruit flavors,
alcohol flavors, and while adult smokers might find these to be very attractive, and I'm sympathetic to that, I'm also concerned that these products, especially products called e-hookah, which are essentially disposable e-cigarettes that have shisha-inspired flavors, those are extremely appealing to youth, and that's something we want to nip in the bud. We don't want youth to start using a nicotine product which either might addict them to nicotine for a lifelong habit or act as a gateway.
Ray Story, you heard Jennifer Pearson. Earlier on in the program, you heard Senator Dick Durbin from Illinois talk about bubble gum and tutti frutti and these other flavors as being specifically to get children involved, or at least people below 18 involved in using these products to make permanent customers out of them. How does your industry respond?
Well, first of all, I would have to agree that some of those names potentially could have been picked a little bit better. But let me state this, that this particular product is not a gateway product for any other tobacco product. The e-cigarette is out there to take the current tobacco user and provide them a less harmful alternative. Let me state that you cannot take this product and all of a sudden put it in the medicinal category, as I am the one that sued the FDA to prove that this product was a tobacco product and not a drug delivery or combination device. At the end of the day, nicotine is a substance that's very closely related to caffeine. One hydrogen is what puts those two apart. At the end of the day, if you look at nicotine, although addictive, the product itself doesn't have any pharmacological effect. It doesn't alter the function of mind or body. So for a drug, you would have to A, alter the function of mind or body, have pharmacological effect, and B, you'd have to make a claim. We're not making any claims with these products. We're stating this product is less harmful. That's not a claim, that is a fact. And that product has the ability to obviously switch people from conventional tobacco to a far less harmful alternative, which is the e-cigarette. And that is where it needs to stay. And then obviously we need regulatory oversight that's logical and responsible to provide the industry with guidelines so that they have the ability to provide the public with a product that is consistent. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure that it's done with the current industry and not big pharma or big tobacco taking it over.
Before I move on to Professor Proctor, let me get a quick response. You say you don't want it to be a gateway use. You don't want it to be considered a bridge to cigarette and tobacco smoking. Who's letting you down if 1.7 million teenagers are vaping? Is it your retailers? Does there have to be more control on that, on the distribution side, to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen?
Well, you got to understand, I sued the FDA in 2009. We got our verdict in 2010. It's been 4 years. 4 years since that ruling that Judge Leon gave us. 4 years of uninterrupted, absolutely zero oversight. That is clearly irresponsible. Now, after a 242-page document from the FDA on proposed rule, we get 75 days to comment on it. 4 years and then 75 days to comment on a proposed rule that is very intricate. At the end, if we would have put age verification in place right after Judge Leon stated that the FDA has authority over tobacco products, we wouldn't even be talking about high school kids utilizing this product, because at that point in time it would have already been an issue, as 40 attorney generals across the land stated that they wanted age verification not just online but also on face-to-face transactions. We could have started there and we wouldn't have this conversation right now.
Professor Proctor, how about that? The idea that this is really the FDA's fault. Ray Story sued them to make this declared a tobacco product, and then they didn't do anything.
Well, there's no doubt that the FDA has been dragging its feet. I think there's some political reasons for that. But, you know, tobacco should have been regulated in the 1950s when it was first found to be causing mass death. In fact, the product should have been removed from sale, the way it was done with butter yellow and a number of other carcinogens. So really, what we're seeing is the beginning of the end of what I would call radical tobacco exceptionalism, where the tobacco industry has been entirely unregulated. So finally, we're starting to see, you know, some of these limited grasps, but I would agree it's way too slow.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of the wrinkles in this regulatory arena. Why didn't they go after premium cigars when they went after cheaper cigars? This is Inside Story. Welcome back to Inside Story. I'm Ray Suarez. Cigarette smoking used to be an accepted national pastime, but 50 years after the Surgeon General warned of the health risks of smoking, the number of smokers nationwide has been cut in half. The e-cigarette burst on the scene in the last decade. Now millions, including teenagers, vape. On this edition of our program, we're talking about the FDA announcement that the government will begin regulating this $2 billion market. Jennifer Pearson, when you look at these interesting rules, finally bringing in roll your own raw tobacco, regulating cheap cigars and small cigars, not premium cigars. What's going on here? What's happening in these regulations?
Well, we know that there's a little bit of political pressure that's being exerted on FDA to exclude premium cigars. That's been going on the Hill for a couple of years. What we're concerned about is that when you create an exclusion, such as not including premium cigars in the proposed deeming regulation, you create an opportunity for the industry to create products that will just tiptoe up to the edge of what a premium cigar is, but be used like a little cigar or a cigarillo. And that creates a loophole, and that'll create a whole new category of products potentially that will reach the people that we're trying to protect.
Ray Story, do you welcome these regulations because it at least gives you clarity and predictability in the years to come as you develop this industry?
Yeah, the regulation is obviously a welcome sight. I mean, it took way too long, as the professor said as well. At the end, it's been 4 years. The problem is that we're going to find that regulation is going to be skewed towards big pharma. Understand that prior to my lawsuit in 2009, they had made this a drug and a drug delivery device. They hadn't checked in on what this product actually did, on whether it had pharmacological effect. They basically just provided this category to big pharma. So, and you saw that not just in the US, you saw that in Europe as well. So that is my issue, that those who are currently working within government, and most of them within the FDA, are going to be closely tied to big pharma. So these rules are going to be skewed. They're going to make the process available for market acceptance for this product, but they could have done that already for the last 4 years. The date that we were talking about earlier was February of 2007 till March of 2011, where you had the ability to provide the information to actually get market authorization from the FDA. None of those have been approved. That is an issue. When you have big government all of a sudden stepping into a sector that they feel that they need to control, then that is potentially a good thing as long as there's not overreaching. And that is clearly what seems to be the case now, because with the regulation as it's currently out there, I think there's going to be a problem with the substantial equivalency.
Professor, we've got only about a minute and a half. When you've seen these proposed rules, is this a make or break era, both the 75-day comment period and what comes out of it, a make or break era for a young American industry? Will the shape of e-cigarettes and electronic nicotine products really be dictated in the really near future?
I think we're in a period of huge transition. You mentioned cigars, which don't cause nearly the harm as cigarettes. And then when you think about electronic cigarettes, those don't have the tar deliveries that regular cigarettes. We have to remember that historically we've had this huge industry of the traditional most deadly products being the ones that are most widely used. And so now we're seeing that come to an end, and that's going to save, you know, millions of lives.
Professor Robert Proctor at Stanford. Ray Story joined us from Amsterdam. Jennifer Pearson was here with me in Washington. Thank you all. Very interesting conversation. That brings us to the end of this edition of Inside Story. Thanks for being with us. The program may be over, but the conversation continues. We want to hear what you think about the issues raised on this or any day's program. Log on to our Facebook page or send us your thoughts on Twitter. Our handle is AJ Inside Story AM, or you can reach me directly at Ray Suarez News. We'll see you next time for Inside Story. In Washington, I'm Ray Suarez.